Thank you for joining and welcome. What follows is a calm examination of everyday factory life in the Soviet era, seen through the eyes of a regular worker navigating the consistent patterns that defined each workday. Attention is given to the routines that recurred, to the physical spaces that surrounded workers, and to the behavioral expectations embedded within a carefully structured industrial setting. In this environment, life progressed through tasks that repeated themselves, through shifts that extended across many hours, and through the measured tempo that characterized manual labor. The factory rises before the eye as a structure built for permanence. Concrete and brick form its outer shell, and the walls carry the marks of long exposure to smoke and moisture. Over many years, airborne residue has settled into the surfaces, darkening them in a way that speaks to their age. These walls were never meant to impress. They were designed to endure, and their flat expanses reflect that purely functional purpose. Windows run along the building in extended horizontal bands. Many sit high above the ground, and their glass has taken on a slight cloudiness over time. This diffusion softens the daylight as it enters, spreading it into a pale and even illumination. The panes are held firmly in metal frames that create rigid geometric lines. Some of these window sections remain sealed throughout the calendar year, which restricts the flow of air from outside into the interior spaces. At the front of the complex stands the main entry gate. Its width accommodates the simultaneous passage of delivery trucks and groups of workers arriving for their shifts. The concrete ground near this entrance shows clear signs of wear. Countless footsteps and the gradual rotation of vehicle tires have polished the texture smooth, creating a surface that reflects its heavy use. Once inside, visitors encounter the first major interior hall. The ceiling rises to considerable height, supported overhead by steel beams arranged in a repeating grid pattern. This vertical space allows both heat and suspended dust particles to drift upward, though they never fully dissipate. Electric lamps descend from above at regular intervals, each one shielded by a protective metal shade. The light they cast is steady and carries a slightly yellow tone. This illumination fills the space without creating harsh contrasts. Even during daylight hours, these artificial lights remain active, blending together with the muted natural light filtering through the windows. Shadows here spread wide and soft, rather than forming sharp edges. The floor beneath consists of concrete laid out in large, connected sections. Visible seams mark where these sections meet. When walked upon, the surface feels firm and unforgiving. Years of heavy equipment movement have left their traces across it. Painted lines appear in various areas, marking out walking paths and designated zones for for storing materials. The paint has worn thin in certain locations, yet the overall layout remains comprehensible through repeated use as much as through visual clarity. Running along the sides of the hall are pipes that travel both horizontally and vertically. They've been painted in dull colors, each shade distinguishing a different function. These pipes carry essential resources throughout the building: steam, compressed air, and other supplies that keep the machinery operational. The machinery itself stands arranged in long rows that mirror the building's shape. Each machine occupies a clearly defined footprint, either bolted directly to the floor or held in place by its own considerable weight. Metal housings conceal many of the moving parts, though belts, shafts, and rotating elements remain exposed in certain sections. The surfaces of these machines tell their own history. Edges have been rounded smooth through repeated contact. Paint has chipped away where tools have made contact over time. Small deposits of grease have accumulated at joints and hinges. The color schemes tend toward muted greens and grays, chosen for their durability rather than any aesthetic appeal. Fixed to the sides of each machine are identification plates, engraved with serial numbers and production details. Sound fills the hall in a way that never stops. It consists of many different tones layered over one another. The steady hum of motors provides a constant baseline. The rhythmic clatter of metal components meeting and then separating adds a percussive element. A low vibration travels through the floor itself. Occasionally, a sharper note cuts through when a part is released or when a mechanism completes its reset cycle. No individual sound maintains dominance for very long. Instead, all these noises blend together into a continuous layer that occupies the air. The sound neither rises dramatically nor falls away. When conversation takes place in this environment, it requires people to stand close together and speak with measured clarity. Air circulation through the building proceeds slowly. Ventilation systems draw some of the air upward toward the ceiling. Large doors positioned at the far ends of the hall permit limited exchange with the outdoor atmosphere. The interior temperature holds steady within a fairly narrow range. During cold seasons, it remains warmer than the air outside. During periods of heat, it stays only slightly cooler. The operating equipment contributes to a persistent warmth that distributes itself evenly throughout the space. Workers dress according to this predictable interior climate, which varies little from one day to the next. Metal surfaces catch the light and create a soft shimmer, rather than producing glare. Dust particles drift continuously through the beams of light, small and constant in their presence. They settle gradually onto any horizontal surface. Maintenance routines clear away much of this accumulation, yet a fine layer invariably returns. The scent that pervades the air combines metal, oil, and heated material. It is not a sharp smell, but it maintains a steady presence. This odor forms as much a part of the environment as the persistent sound. Above, cables run along fixed trays mounted to the ceiling. These cables branch out toward each piece of machinery. Switch boxes have been mounted at regular intervals on the support columns, each one labeled with numbers or symbols. The arrangement follows an orderly logic, though the network appears complex when first observed. The repetition of forms creates a visual rhythm, beam after beam, lamp after lamp, machine after machine. This rhythm mirrors the mechanical repetition of the equipment itself. Along one wall, storage racks hold materials that await processing. These materials are stacked in organized layers, separated according to type and size. Wooden pallets support their weight, and small gaps remain between the stacks to allow for movement and access. The materials themselves display various textures and colors. Dull grey metal pieces sit alongside darker components coated with protective substances. Lighter packaging elements occupy other sections. The arrangement rarely undergoes abrupt changes. Supplies move forward at a gradual pace, replaced in a steady flow that aligns with the rhythm of production. Near the center of the hall runs a wide aisle, kept clear for the passage of transport carts. These carts move on solid wheels that produce a distinctive low rolling sound, different from the sharper tones of the machinery. Their paths follow established routes that have become predictable through repetition. This open aisle provides a visual break in the otherwise dense arrangement of equipment, though it remains filled with sound and the faint haze that characterizes the air. The interior walls are plain, painted in light industrial tones, chosen for their ability to reflect available light. Notices and printed instructions have been mounted on boards at strategic points, their lettering clear and direct. Their presence integrates into the environment, read when necessary but otherwise absorbed into the background. Clocks are positioned high on the walls where they can be seen from multiple angles throughout the hall. Their movement is steady and silent. Their faces are simple and functional, designed purely for timekeeping. In some sections of the building, ceiling-mounted cranes or lifting mechanisms run along fixed rails. When in use, they move slowly, guided by operators who stand on the floor below. When idle, these cranes remain suspended above the machinery, motionless. Their metal frames cast faint shadows that shift slightly as the lighting conditions change with the progression of the day. The overall impression created by this space is one of continuity. Nothing in the physical arrangement suggests the possibility of sudden change. Each element occupies a place that has been defined for it. The relationships between machines, aisles, storage areas, and structural supports remain constant. Workers entering the hall each day encounter the same layout, the same pathways, the same sequence of visual markers that guide their movement without requiring deliberate thought. Even the smallest details follow this established pattern. Hooks for hanging tools are placed in positions that remain consistent. Containers for waste material stand at fixed points near each workstation. Where protective barriers exist, they are marked with paint that has worn over time, yet still signals their boundaries clearly. The environment does not draw attention to itself through variation. Instead, it provides a stable framework within which daily activity can unfold. The acoustics of the hall are shaped by both its size and the materials used in its construction. Hard surfaces reflect sound rather than absorbing it, which prevents the noise from fading quickly. As a result, the combined sound of all the machines forms a dense layer that seems to rest permanently in the space. Vibrations travel through the metal structures and down into the floor, where they register as a faint but constant trembling. This sensation is subtle yet persistent. It becomes part of the physical experience of simply standing within the building. Air currents are influenced by the movement of the large doors and by the operation of ventilation fans. When a door opens, a slow exchange occurs. A brief trace of outside air enters and mixes with the interior atmosphere. This change is noticeable, but it does not fundamentally alter the overall conditions. The factory environment quickly reasserts itself, returning to its steady state. The lighting remains consistent across most of the floor area. However, areas positioned near windows carry a slightly cooler tone during daylight hours. As the day moves forward, the angle of external light shifts, which alters the brightness of certain surfaces. These changes happen gradually and do not disrupt overall visibility. The artificial lamps provide a constant baseline that prevents any sharp transitions in illumination. In the corners of the hall, maintenance areas contain workbenches, spare parts, and tools arranged in drawers or hanging from pegboards. These zones are quieter when not actively in use, though they still exist within the range of the general sound field that fills the building. Their presence supports the continuity of operations. They ensure that adjustments and repairs can be carried out without disrupting the broader environment. The factory interior thus presents itself as a landscape defined by repetition, durability, and measured function. Every beam, every surface, every pathway contributes to a coherent whole. The physical setting does not vary according to individual mood or daily circumstance. It remains steady and unchanging. It shapes movement, sound, and air into a consistent pattern that frames the working day from the moment it begins. The journey toward the factory starts along streets that have become familiar through repetition. The ground surface transitions gradually from the uneven pathways of residential areas to the broader roads that serve industrial zones. Buildings grow larger as one progresses, their shapes becoming more uniform. The open sky begins to narrow between walls constructed of brick and concrete. Footsteps follow routes that have been worn smooth by repeated use over time. Small groups of workers move in the same general direction without clustering tightly together. The clothing they wear reflects practical needs rather than individual variation. Coats are selected for their durability and for the warmth they provide during colder seasons. When temperatures rise, lighter jackets make their appearance, though the environment awaiting them at their destination remains more stable than the air outside. As the factory building comes into view, its outer walls rise without any decorative elements. The scale of the structure defines a clear boundary between the open street and the enclosed production space that lies within. The main gate stands open during the periods when workers arrive, its metal structure fixed firmly in position. A guard post sits nearby, its windows catching and reflecting the pale light of morning. Entry proceeds in a steady flow. The movements are unhurried yet direct, shaped by the shared understanding of when shifts begin. Sound from inside the building carries outward in a softened form. It presents itself as a low mechanical presence that becomes clearer and more distinct with each step taken forward. Crossing the threshold brings a subtle shift in the quality of the air. The scents of the outdoors begin to fade, replaced by the familiar combination of oil, metal, and dust that has been warmed by the interior heat. The temperature moves toward the interior norm, which reduces the need for heavier outer garments. Just beyond the entrance lies a transitional area that provides space for the removal of coats and the storage of personal items. Rows of hooks or lockers line the walls, arranged in long, unbroken sequences. The surfaces here show the effects of frequent contact. Paint has been smoothed by years of hands and fabric brushing against it. The process of hanging a coat and adjusting clothing follows an order that has been repeated so many times it requires almost no conscious thought. Footwear remains unchanged, built to withstand the demands of long hours spent on hard floors. Some workers adjust their sleeves, secure their cuffs, or fasten protective layers suited to the specific tasks they will perform. These preparations are conducted quietly and efficiently. Conversations, when they do occur, are brief and kept low in volume. This restraint is shaped by the awareness that the main sound environment lies just ahead. The body begins to shift gradually from the rhythm of walking outdoors to the more measured pace that will be required inside. Time is made visible by wall-mounted clocks positioned above the storage area. Their faces are large and their numbers are clear. Workers glance upward as part of their entry routine, confirming that they are aligned with the shift schedule. The movement of the clock hands across the dial proceeds steadily. It marks the transition from personal time to work time. No external signal interrupts this moment. Instead, the shared attention to the clock creates a coordinated flow of movement toward the interior halls. From the changing area, corridors lead deeper into the building. The walls are plain and painted in light tones that reflect the overhead lamps. The floor remains concrete, and its surface feels cooler than the air surrounding it. Footsteps echo softly in these corridors, less masked by machinery than they will be once workers reach the main production areas. Pipes and cables run along the ceiling, and they seem to guide the eye forward. The path turns at predictable angles, following the structural layout of the complex as it was designed. As workers approach the main production hall, the sound begins to grow denser. Individual tones become possible to distinguish. The rotation of motors can be heard. The impact of components meeting one another rings out. The steady drive of belts and gears adds another layer. The corridor opens out into the larger space, and the full scale of the interior reveals itself once again. Light from the high windows blends with the artificial illumination. The air carries its usual faint haze. Each worker moves toward a specific station. The routes they follow are known through repetition. They can be traced without hesitation between the rows of equipment and along the aisles marked out on the floor. The distance from entrance to workstation varies from person to person, but the sequence of visual markers remains constant for each individual. A particular column, a section of storage racks, a junction where painted floor lines meet. These features serve as quiet guides that require no verbal instruction. At the workstation, preparation begins through small and deliberate actions. Tools are checked to ensure they are in their proper positions and in good condition. Materials required for the first phase of production are brought within reach. Controls on the machine are observed. Levers and switches are set to their starting positions. Surfaces may be wiped down with cloths kept nearby, removing dust that has settled or residue left from the previous shift. These motions are not hurried. They establish a state of readiness in a measured and methodical way. Machines that were idle at the time of the shift change stand silent for a short period. Their metal surfaces feel cool relative to those already operating in other parts of the hall. When power is engaged, a gradual sequence begins to unfold. A switch is turned, a motor engages and a low hum starts to build. The sound increases to its regular operating level over the course of a few seconds, merging smoothly with the surrounding noise. Vibrations begin to travel through the machine frame and down into the floor, becoming part of the constant background sensation that defines the space. The worker's posture adjusts to match the dimensions of the equipment. Feet find stable positions on the concrete, spaced to allow for balance during the repeated motions that will follow. Hands rest briefly on familiar surfaces, confirming alignment and reach. The orientation of the body toward the machine defines the working stance that will be maintained for extended periods. Breathing settles into a steady rhythm that matches the pace of preparation. Materials are placed into feeders, trays, or holding areas according to the specific process required. Each piece has a defined orientation. Edges must align with guides, and contact points are checked visually. These actions are performed with consistent pressure, neither forceful nor hesitant. The hands move along paths that have been learned through repetition, which minimizes unnecessary motion. Around this worker, similar preparations are taking place at adjacent stations. The movements are parallel rather than synchronized, yet together they form a collective transition from stillness to activity. The general noise level in the hall rises slightly as more machines reach their operating speed. The air warms by small increments as energy begins to flow through the equipment. Light reflects more actively from surfaces that have begun to move. Supervisory presence may be visible at a distance. A supervisor might be walking along the central aisle or standing near a column. Their movement is steady and unhurried, forming part of the normal beginning of the shift. They observe the process without interrupting the general rhythm that is being established. This presence contributes to the atmosphere without requiring direct interaction. Final adjustments are made before full production can begin. Gauges are checked, and their needles are confirmed to be resting within expected ranges. Guards and covers are verified to be in place. Waste containers are positioned within reach, but kept out of the main path of movement. The workspace forms itself into a compact zone where each object has a clear purpose and a designated location. When the machine begins its first full cycle, the motion it produces is smooth and repetitive. A component enters the system, is shaped or processed according to the machine's function, and then exits along a defined path. The worker's hands guide, support, or monitor these movements. The timing that exists between cycles establishes the base rhythm of the day ahead. It is neither fast nor slow when considered in isolation, but it becomes the standard against which all subsequent time will be measured. The transition from preparation to continuous work happens without any distinct boundary. One completed cycle leads directly into the next. The body settles into its working pattern. Attention narrows to focus on the immediate field of action, the moving parts, the position of materials, the signals emanating from the machine. External concerns begin to recede, replaced by the consistent demands of the equipment. The surrounding hall now operates at its regular intensity. Sound fills the space evenly from all directions. Light remains stable and unchanging. Air circulates with slow, mechanical regularity. The beginning of the workday has concluded not with any signal or announcement, but rather through the gradual establishment of motion, sound, and posture that together define the ongoing shift. The work settles into a continuous sequence shaped by both the design of the machine and the flow of materials moving through it. Each cycle follows an identical order. A raw piece is placed into position, guided along fixed edges or into a holding frame that determines its alignment. Contact surfaces meet with a sound that is dull and regular, neither sharp nor soft, but consistent in its tone. Once engaged, the mechanism carries the piece forward through its internal motion. This motion is driven by motors, whose steady rotation defines the pace more decisively than any human choice could. The worker's role exists close to the boundary between motion and stillness. Hands move to introduce each new piece at the correct moment. They then withdraw to a neutral position while the machine completes its internal phase. Eyes remain directed toward a narrow field where material, tool, and output come together. Attention does not travel far beyond this zone. The repeated observation of the same movement path reduces the need for deliberate focus. Yet awareness remains active. It stands ready to notice any variation in sound, vibration, or timing that might occur. The surfaces of the machine reveal the logic of its function. Flat plates hold materials steady and secure. Cylindrical parts rotate with a quiet blur of motion. Levers rise and fall in arcs defined by the geometry of metal joints. Each motion has a beginning, a middle, and an end, but these stages blend together across the cycles. There is no clear pause between them. The conclusion of one action becomes the starting point of the next, forming a chain without any visible gaps. Sound provides a second layer of information beyond what the eyes can see. Beneath the general noise of the hall, each machine possesses its own distinctive pattern. A low hum persists for as long as the motor continues to run. Over this bass tone, shorter sounds repeat themselves at fixed intervals. A press closes with a specific sound. A component releases with another. A belt shifts tension with yet another. The worker becomes familiar with this pattern through prolonged exposure rather than through conscious analysis. Any change in the pattern stands out not as an intellectual observation, but as a difference in the felt texture of the sound itself. The body adapts to the rhythm established by the equipment. Movements become economical, shaped specifically to match the timing of the cycle. There is no excess motion. The hands travel the same short distance again and again, from the supply of materials to the point of insertion, then back to a resting position. Shoulders remain level throughout. The spine holds a stable angle adjusted to the height of the working surface. Feet stay planted within a small area of floor, shifting only enough to maintain balance. Materials arrive either in small groups or in steady streams, depending on the nature of the process. They are stacked or arranged within reach, their edges aligned to simplify the act of handling. As each piece is used, the stack lowers gradually. This slow change marks time in a physical way that exists separate from clocks or other signals. When the last piece from one group is taken, another set is brought forward, and the sequence continues without interruption. The output of the machine emerges along a path that has been defined for it. Often it moves in onto a tray or a moving surface that carries it away to the next stage. The finished or partially finished pieces accumulate in an ordered manner. Their regular appearance confirms that the process is functioning as it was designed to. The worker's glance passes over them briefly, checking their shape, surface quality, and completeness without engaging in prolonged inspection. Adjacent stations operate under similar rhythms, though the exact timing may differ slightly from one to another. When viewed from a distance, these variations create a complex pattern of motion across the hall. Arms rise and lower at different intervals. Components move along separate tracks, yet all are governed by the principle of mechanical repetition, and no single action stands apart for very long. The overall impression that results remains steady and continuous. Coordination with neighboring workers occurs through shared awareness rather than through extended communication. A material cart may pass between stations at times that have become predictable. When a larger piece requires two pairs of hands to manage, the exchange is brief and direct. Gestures replace spoken words, shaped by the noise level that makes conversation difficult. Once the shared action is complete, each worker returns to their individual cycle without delay. The passage of time within this environment is measured less by external reference points than by the count of cycles that have been completed. Each repetition resembles the one that came before it, creating a continuity that smooths out the differences between individual moments. Light remains constant throughout. The air retains its familiar warmth and its distinctive scent. The floor continues to transmit the same faint vibration. These stable conditions reinforce the sense of an ongoing present that extends without clear divisions. Machines demand attention to small adjustments that maintain their optimal function. A control wheel may need to be turned slightly to preserve alignment. A guide surface may need to be cleared of fragments that have accumulated. These interventions are brief and precise in nature. They occur within the established rhythm, rather than interrupting it. The worker's hands learn the exact force required, neither pressing too hard nor applying too little pressure. Protective guards and barriers define the safe range of movement around each machine. Their presence shapes both posture and hand position. The body remains outside the zones that have been marked as dangerous, while still reaching close enough to guide materials effectively. This boundary becomes part of the learned pattern. It is observed without the need for conscious deliberation. Occasionally, a variation in the quality or size of the material requires a subtle change in how it is handled. The worker responds through small shifts in grip or in timing. These adaptations do not alter the overall rhythm of the work. They are absorbed into the sequence and soon find themselves repeated when similar pieces appear again. The eyes alternate their focus between the point of entry, the central action of the machine, and the emerging output. This visual circuit repeats itself as reliably as the mechanical cycle does. Blinking occurs naturally, but the gaze returns each time to the same specific locations. Peripheral movement from other stations registers only faintly in awareness. It is acknowledged but not examined in detail. Heat generated by friction and by electrical activity adds to the stable warmth of the surrounding air. Metal surfaces feel slightly warm to the touch in places where contact is necessary. This sensation remains constant enough that it fades into the background of awareness over time. The skin adjusts to it, and the feeling becomes simply part of the normal environment. The worker's breathing aligns itself with the pace of motion. Inhalations and exhalations occur without conscious effort, matching the moderate physical demand created by repeated arm movements and by standing for extended periods. There is no sharp exertion involved. There is only a continuous output of small actions that accumulate steadily over the course of time. Dust and fine particles produced by the manufacturing process are drawn away by the ventilation system, yet some inevitably settle on nearby surfaces. Cloths kept at each station remove these layers at intervals, restoring the smoothness of contact points. The wiping motion is brief and efficient. Then the cycle resumes immediately. visual indicators on the machine, such as small lights or markings on gauges, remain within the ranges that are expected. Their steady display contributes to the sense of continuity that pervades the work. A quick glance confirms their position. Then attention returns to the moving parts. The rhythm of production shapes the perception of duration in a particular way. Individual minutes do not stand out clearly. Instead, the mind registers sequences of completed actions. The steady nature of the work reduces the number of abrupt transitions. One moment flows into the next through repeated motion and through the consistency of sound. Even when a machine pauses briefly to accept a new batch of material or to clear an internal stage, the interruption is short and anticipated. The worker uses this interval to adjust their stance, to shift their weight, or to prepare the next set of pieces. As soon as the mechanism resumes its operation, the established rhythm returns without disruption. In this way, the nature of the work is defined by continuity rather than by variation. The machine provides the underlying structure. The worker's movements fill the spaces that exist between the machine's mechanical actions. Together, they create a pattern that persists across the hours. This pattern is marked by repetition, by steady sound, and by the close alignment of human motion with industrial rhythm. The body begins to register the steady demands placed upon it as the hours stretch forward. Through the soles of the shoes comes a constant upward pressure from the concrete floor, firm and unyielding in its nature. This sensation does not shift sharply from one moment to the next, yet it gathers force through accumulated time, working its way into the muscles of the legs. Weight transfers from one foot to the other at intervals. These shifts happen not as deliberate actions, but as gradual responses to the sustained requirement of standing. The knees remain slightly flexed, positioned to absorb the vibration that travels through the machine frames and down into the floor. The arms maintain their measured motions, continuing to lift, guide, and release. Materials along paths that remain the same. Muscles in the forearms and shoulders hold a consistent level of tension throughout. No single movement causes strain when considered on its own. Instead, it is the repetition itself that produces a slow heaviness, one that becomes noticeable only as duration extends. Hands close around edges and surfaces with a pressure that has become familiar, neither tight nor loose. The points of contact on the skin grow warm over time. The texture of metal and processed material becomes integrated into the steady field of sensory experience. The spine maintains a stable angle oriented toward the surface where work is performed. As time passes, the small muscles running along the back engage continuously in order to hold this position. The effort required remains moderate in intensity, yet it continues without interruption. At intervals that fall between cycles, the torso straightens slightly before returning to its working posture. These adjustments occur within the rhythm of production. They do not interrupt the flow of action. They serve instead to redistribute tension without drawing conscious attention to themselves. Vibration from the machine enters the body through the hands whenever contact is required. The sensation is fine and constant. It is felt more than it is seen. It travels through the fingers and palms, then diminishes in intensity as it moves upward along the arms. This vibration blends with the background hum that fills the hall, forming a physical counterpart to the environment of sound. The body grows accustomed to it over time. It becomes a stable reference point rather than a source of disturbance. The air in the hall remains warm, influenced both by the operating equipment and by the limited exchange that occurs with the outside. As time moves forward, clothing that felt neutral at the start of the shift begins to hold a trace of retained heat. Sleeves may be rolled slightly when the task allows for it. Movements remain controlled throughout and do not change in pace. The skin along the forehead and neck registers a light moisture that forms gradually. It remains within comfortable limits. This condition does not fluctuate quickly, which reinforces the sense of a steady and unchanging environment. Dust and fine residue settle onto exposed surfaces. This includes sleeves and gloves where they are worn. The accumulation is thin but persistent in its presence. Cloths used to clear work areas also pass over hands or forearms when the need arises. These actions are brief and purposeful. They return the skin and tools to a cleaner state without creating any pause in the overall rhythm. The scent of oil and heated metal remains consistent in the air, neither intensifying nor fading in any noticeable way. The eyes maintain their narrow field of attention. They track the same movement paths again and again. The muscles around the eyes hold focus at a short distance. Occasionally, they shift to observe the output or the supply stack. Blinks occur at regular intervals, keeping vision clear in the dry air of the industrial space. The gaze does not wander far from its established zone. Peripheral motion from neighboring stations registers only as a general awareness that activity is occurring. The neck supports the head in a slightly forward orientation, a position suited to work performed at close range. Over extended time, this position leads to a gradual heaviness developing at the base of the skull and along the shoulders. Small rotations of the head occur during the natural pauses that fall between cycles. These rotations ease the tension before the head returns to the central line of sight. The movements are subtle. They are integrated into the pattern of work without disrupting it. Breathing remains steady throughout. It is shaped by moderate exertion rather than by intense effort. Inhalations draw in air that carries the familiar industrial scent. Exhalations pass unnoticed within the broader environment. The rhythm of breathing aligns itself with the pace of motion, neither hurried nor slow. This regularity contributes to the overall sense of continuity that pervades the work. The hands develop a consistent tactile awareness of the materials they encounter. Edges, surfaces, and weights are recognized through touch as much as through sight. When a piece differs slightly in dimension or in finish, the change is detected through the fingers. The response involves a minor adjustment in grip or in angle. This adjustment is absorbed into the sequence without altering the pace. Such variations do not break the rhythm. They become part of its subtle texture instead. The legs support the weight of the body with minimal visible movement. Muscles along the calves and thighs remain engaged, maintaining balance on the firm surface beneath. Occasionally, a heel lifts briefly before it settles again, redistributing pressure across the foot. These shifts are small in scale. They do not disturb the alignment maintained with the workstation. Over the course of hours, the sense of weight in the lower body increases gradually. It becomes a stable background condition, rather than a sharp sensation. The shoulders hold a level line. They rise and fall only slightly with the movement of the arms. The repeated lifting of materials within a limited range creates a uniform load that does not spike sharply at any point. Instead, it forms a continuous demand. The body adjusts by maintaining a steady output of energy rather than alternating between periods of exertion and periods of rest. Clothing at points of contact with tools or with machine edges shows signs of friction developing. Fabric smooths in places where it brushes repeatedly against metal surfaces. Gloves, when worn, conform to the shapes they handle most frequently. These small changes reflect the ongoing interaction between body and environment. They do not alter function in any way. They simply indicate sustained use over time. Sound remains constant in the hall, and its presence influences the perception of fatigue. The continuous hum and clatter create a uniform acoustic field within which individual moments do not stand out. The body's awareness of effort unfolds within this stable soundscape. There is no sharp signal that marks the passage of time. There is only the accumulation of cycles and the gradual deepening of physical sensation. At intervals, materials are replenished at the station. This event introduces a brief change in posture as the worker reaches to reposition stacks or trays. The motion engages different muscles for a short period, offering variation within the otherwise narrow range of movement. Once the supply is arranged properly, the body returns to its standard stance. The familiar cycle resumes immediately. Sweat, when present, remains light in quantity and does not interfere with grip. Cloths or sleeves pass across the forehead in quick motions during the natural breaks that occur in the cycle. These gestures are brief and controlled. They are integrated into the flow without creating pause. The environment's temperature and airflow prevent rapid changes in condition. They keep physical conditions within a predictable band of experience. As the hours continue to extend, the initial sense of readiness shifts into a state of steady endurance. The body no longer registers each motion as a separate event. Instead, actions link together into longer sequences. Fatigue does not arrive as a sudden event that can be marked. It appears instead as a gradual thickening of sensation in muscles and joints. This state remains manageable throughout. It is supported by the consistent pace and by the absence of abrupt demands. The hardness of the floor remains unchanged throughout the shift, and its effect on the feet becomes more noticeable as time passes. Insoles and sturdy footwear absorb part of the impact that occurs with each small shift of weight. Yet, the underlying firmness persists. The worker's stance adjusts subtly. Toes angle outward or inward for brief periods before returning to a neutral position. These adjustments help to distribute the load without interrupting the working pattern that has been established. The hands continue to meet materials at regular intervals. Skin temperature rises slightly from the combination of contact and motion, then stabilizes at a consistent level. Small traces of oil or dust are wiped away as the need arises, maintaining a familiar tactile surface. The sense of touch remains reliable throughout. It guides movements with minimal need for visual confirmation. In this sustained period of work, physical strain is not dramatic in nature. It is not sharply defined. It is characterized instead by continuity, by repetition, and by gradual accumulation. Each part of the body contributes a steady effort, one that is matched to the unchanging demands placed upon it by the machine. The environment does not fluctuate around the worker. The rhythm of work does not alter. These stable conditions allow fatigue to develop evenly, rather than in peaks and valleys. The combination of posture, motion, sound and temperature forms a stable field within which the body operates. Adjustments occur in small increments throughout. They maintain function without introducing interruption. The passage of time is reflected not in visible markers that can be seen, but rather in the deepening weight felt in the muscles and in the increasing value placed on each brief moment of stillness that falls between cycles. Within the production hall, the structure of roles makes itself visible through patterns of movement and position, rather than through formal signals or announcements. Each worker remains primarily at a fixed station, oriented toward a specific machine or toward a particular process. In contrast to this, certain individuals move along the aisles that run between the rows of equipment. Their paths extend across multiple stations. Their pace differs from the repetitive motions that characterize machine operation. This difference in movement marks their function within the structure of the daily work. Supervisors and foremen can be identified by their broader range of travel and by the direction of their attention, which is outward rather than inward toward a single task. Their clothing follows the same practical standards as that of others, yet it often remains less marked by immediate contact with materials. They pause at intervals beside workstations, observing the alignment of processes, the condition of equipment, and the flow of output. These pauses are brief and evenly distributed in time. They form part of a routine circuit that repeats itself across the shift. The physical placement of authority corresponds to visibility within the space. Positions near central aisles, elevated platforms, or areas with clear sight lines allow oversight of multiple stations at once. From these points, a supervisor can observe the general rhythm of work as it unfolds. The rise and fall of arms, the steady passage of materials through processes, and the continuity of machine motion. The role does not require constant speech or verbal direction. Observation itself forms a continuous activity. It is woven into the environment without drawing sharp focus to itself. Instructions, when they are given, are delivered at close range and in concise form. The surrounding noise shapes communication into short exchanges that can be understood despite the sound. A supervisor may indicate a minor adjustment with a gesture toward a gauge, a material stack, or a machine setting. The worker responds with a nod, or with a brief verbal acknowledgement. The regular cycle resumes immediately. These interactions occur without creating interruption to the broader rhythm of production. Foremen often remain responsible for a defined section of the hall. Their familiarity with specific machines and with particular processes allows them to move confidently among the stations they oversee. They recognize small changes in sound or in motion. They may stop to observe more closely when a variation appears. Their stance during these moments is steady. Hands rest at their sides or lightly on a nearby surface. After a short period of observation, they continue along their established route. Senior workers also form part of this layered structure. They remain at stations in the same way as others, but they carry an added role through their accumulated experience. When a less experienced worker encounters a difficulty, assistance comes from the nearest person with greater familiarity. This help is practical and immediate in nature. It focuses on restoring the established rhythm. The exchange involves demonstration rather than extended explanation. Once the issue is resolved, each person returns to their position. Task distribution reflects this structure clearly. At the start of shifts or during transitions between batches of material, foremen may direct the allocation of specific duties. These assignments are conveyed in measured tones, often before machines reach their full operating speed. Once tasks are set, they remain stable for extended periods. Changes occur gradually. They usually happen in response to the flow of materials or to the condition of equipment, rather than as the result of sudden decisions. Observation is continuous in nature, but not intrusive in appearance. The circuits followed by supervisors repeat with similar timing throughout the day. Workers become accustomed to their presence over time. They integrate it into the background of the environment much as they do the sound of machinery. The awareness of being observed exists as a steady condition, rather than as a sharp event that demands reaction. It influences posture and attention in subtle ways. It reinforces adherence to established procedures without the need for constant verbal reminders. Physical distance between roles remains modest throughout the hall. There are no barriers separating supervisors from workers on the floor. Movement occurs within the same aisles and along the same concrete surfaces. This shared space contributes to a sense of unified environment, even though functions differ between individuals. Authority is expressed through patterns of motion, through the direction of gaze, and through the ability to initiate adjustments. It is not expressed through distinct physical separation. Written information supports this structure in visible ways. Boards positioned at certain points display production figures, schedules, or procedural notes. Supervisors may update or reference these boards during their rounds. Workers glance at them when passing or during brief pauses. The boards remain fixed elements in the environment. Their presence reinforces the organized framework that structures the day. The tone of interaction stays consistent throughout. Speech is practical in nature. It is directed toward the immediate requirements of work. Extended conversation between roles is rare during periods of active production. The surrounding noise and the demand of machines encourage efficiency in the use of words. Gestures often substitute for longer explanations. They point toward a lever, a stack of materials, or a control dial. The timing of oversight follows the rhythm of the shift closely. Early in the work period, the attention of supervisors may focus on confirming that machines operate within expected parameters. Later in the shift, their circuits emphasize the flow of output and the condition of materials. These patterns repeat daily. They create predictability in when and how authority appears at each station. When equipment requires maintenance beyond what can be handled through routine adjustment, a different set of personnel enters the scene. Maintenance workers arrive with toolkits and move directly to the machine in question. Their presence is temporary and focused on the specific task. Supervisors coordinate this activity. They stand nearby to observe progress and to ensure minimal disruption to the processes occurring around them. Once the task is complete, maintenance staff depart. The regular structure reasserts itself. The hierarchy is also reflected in responsibility for documentation. Supervisors carry small notebooks or forms on which they record observations. These records are made during pauses in their movement. They are often compiled while standing near a column or at the edge of an aisle. Writing is brief and methodical in nature. After noting the necessary details, they return to their circuit. Body language conveys expectations as clearly as spoken words do. A supervisor standing with a steady gaze directed toward a workstation signals attention without the need for speaking. The worker continues the task, aware of this observation. When the gaze shifts away and the supervisor moves on, the atmosphere returns fully to the baseline rhythm. Such exchanges are routine in nature. They do not alter the overall pace of work. Break periods follow a similar structure of coordination. Foremen may signal the timing of rest in coordination with production needs. Workers leave their stations in small groups. They ensure machines are in safe states before stepping away. Supervisors remain visible during these transitions. They maintain continuity of oversight while allowing the temporary reduction in activity to occur. Authority within the factory does not appear through dramatic gestures or through sudden interventions. It is embedded in the layout of movement, in the pattern of observation, and in the established channels through which instruction flows. Workers recognize these patterns through daily repetition. The presence of supervisors and foremen becomes another stable element of the environment. It is comparable to the arrangement of machines or to the placement of aisles. This structure shapes the psychological atmosphere without placing overt emphasis on itself. Awareness of roles and of expectations remains steady throughout the day. It influences how tasks are approached and how attention is maintained. The hierarchy operates through consistency rather than through fluctuation. It reinforces the ordered character of the working day in a way that becomes integrated into the rhythm of production itself. Social interaction unfolds on the factory floor within the boundaries established by noise, motion, and the steady demands placed by the machines. Communication does not vanish entirely, but it adapts itself to the environment. It takes on forms that can fit between the cycles of work and within the narrow spaces where attention can briefly expand beyond the immediate task at hand. Exchanges are short and measured in nature. They are shaped by proximity and by familiarity, rather than by extended dialogue. Workers positioned at stations adjacent to one another develop an awareness of each other's rhythms over time. Even when direct eye contact does not occur, the timing of movements becomes known. The moment when a piece is lifted, the instant when a tray is shifted, the pause that precedes the arrangement of a new stack, all of these become familiar. This shared sense of timing allows coordination to happen when it is needed. A hand extends to receive a part. Another releases it. The transfer occurs smoothly, without halting the sequence dictated by the machine. Such cooperation is practical in nature. It is embedded in the flow of work itself. Speech must compete with the mechanical sound that surrounds it. As a result, voices remain low and are directed close to the listener's ear. Words are chosen for their clarity and for their brevity. A remark about the supply of materials, a note that a cart is approaching, or a simple acknowledgement passes quickly through the air. Then it fades back into the general noise. There is little repetition. If a message is not understood the first time, a gesture often replaces any further attempt at speech. Gestures form an important part of how communication occurs. A nod signals readiness to proceed. A raised hand indicates a brief delay. A pointing motion directs attention toward a gauge, toward a stack of parts, or toward a tool that has been placed slightly out of its proper position. These movements are economical in nature. They are designed not to disrupt posture or to interrupt rhythm. Over time, their meanings become standardized within the group. This reduces the need for verbal explanation. Facial expressions are subdued in this environment. This is partly due to the concentration required by the work, and partly because distance and lighting soften the detail that can be observed. A brief tightening around the eyes may signal effort during a heavier lift. A relaxed mouth may indicate that the cycle is proceeding normally. These cues are noticed at the edge of vision rather than through direct observation. They contribute to a general sense of the group's state without drawing focus away from the machines. Shared tools create moments of contact between workers. A measuring device or a handling instrument may pass from one station to the next. The exchange follows a path that has become predictable. The receiving hand moves into place at the end of one cycle. The tool is transferred. Each worker returns to their individual tasks. These interactions are routine in nature. They carry no sense of interruption. When a minor difficulty arises, such as a piece that does not align easily, assistance may come from the nearest worker. The helper steps slightly closer, observes for a moment, and makes a small adjustment with practiced motion. No extended discussion follows this intervention. Once the issue is resolved, both individuals return to their positions. This pattern reinforces a sense of collective function without altering the overall quiet tone that pervades the space. Awareness of others extends beyond the immediate neighbors at adjacent stations. The movement of carts along the central aisles, the arrival of fresh materials, and the departure of finished goods are observed by many at once. These events create subtle shifts in attention across the hall. Eyes lift briefly from the workstation, then they return. The shared recognition of these routine passages contributes to a background sense of connection among individuals who otherwise remain focused on separate tasks. During natural pauses in the machine cycle, which may last only a few seconds, workers sometimes exchange brief remarks, unrelated to the immediate process. These comments are simple and factual in nature. They often concern the temperature, the condition of materials, or the timing of breaks. Laughter is rare. When it does occur, it remains quiet and short in duration. The surrounding noise absorbs it quickly. Break periods provide a more distinct setting for interaction. Yet even in these moments, the tone remains measured. Workers move toward designated areas in small groups. They sit on benches or on low stools, arranged in rows. Containers holding food are opened. Eating proceeds without haste. Conversations occur in low voices. They are shaped by the shared understanding that the pause is temporary. Topics remain close to daily routines, to work conditions, or to household matters expressed in general terms. Seating arrangements tend to repeat themselves day after day. Individuals occupy similar positions relative to one another. This forms stable patterns of proximity. The regularity reduces the need for negotiation or for choice. The physical closeness allows speech at a lower volume than would be required on the factory floor. Yet the content of conversation remains restrained. Long stories or animated exchanges are uncommon. Body posture during breaks reflects the accumulation of physical effort that has occurred. Backs lean against walls. Shoulders drop slightly from their working position. Hands rest loosely on knees or on food containers. These positions signal a temporary release from the precise alignment required at the machines. Even so, movements remain moderate in scale. The rest period unfolds as a gradual easing, rather than as a sharp contrast to what came before. After breaks conclude, the return to stations happens in a steady flow. Workers rise from their seats. They close their containers. They follow familiar routes back through the aisles. Brief remarks may pass between them as they walk, but attention shifts progressively toward the machines. By the time each worker reaches their workstation, social focus has narrowed again to the task that awaits. Throughout the shift, the presence of others provides a constant yet understated form of companionship. Individuals rarely work in isolation within the large hall. The sound of nearby activity, the sight of repeated motions at adjacent stations, and the shared experience of the environment all create a sense of collective participation. This connection does not require frequent verbal expression to be maintained. It is sustained through parallel action. Differences in age or in experience influence interaction in subtle ways. More experienced workers may speak slightly more during pauses. They offer practical advice or recall established procedures. Younger workers listen, respond briefly, and apply the information they receive. These exchanges remain focused on work rather than on personal history. The emphasis stays on maintaining continuity and on avoiding disruption. Silence holds a stable place within these social patterns. Long stretches pass without any spoken words between neighboring stations. This silence does not suggest distance or tension between individuals. It reflects the dominance of mechanical sound and the need for sustained concentration. The absence of speech becomes part of the shared understanding. It is comfortable in its predictability. Eye contact occurs briefly and often without any direct frontal gaze being required. A sideways glance during a shared lift, a quick meeting of eyes when a tool is passed, or a short look during a pause. These moments communicate presence without requiring sustained attention. They are small in scale, but frequent in occurrence. They form a network of acknowledgement that extends across the hall. In this environment, social life is integrated into the structure of work rather than being separated from it. Interaction follows the same principles that govern production itself: repetition, economy of movement, and adaptation to a steady rhythm. The atmosphere remains calm and restrained throughout. It is shaped by noise, by routine, and by the constant alignment of individual effort with the collective process. Break periods arrive as part of the established schedule. Their timing is anticipated through familiarity rather than through sudden announcement. The shift from continuous machine rhythm to temporary rest happens in a gradual sequence. At each station, the current cycle is completed. Materials are placed in stable positions. Controls are set so that equipment remains in a safe state. These closing motions are deliberate and unhurried in nature. They ensure that the workspace can be resumed without confusion. Workers step away from their stations in small numbers. They move along the same aisles that are used for material transport. The sound of machinery continues in many parts of the hall, though in some sections it lessens as groups pause simultaneously. The change in overall volume is subtle. The dominant impression remains one of ongoing industrial sound. Now it is interspersed with the softer cadence of footsteps on concrete. Break areas are located along the sides of the building or in adjacent rooms connected by short corridors. The walls here are plain. They are painted in light tones that reflect the overhead lamps. Benches and simple tables stand in rows. Their surfaces have been worn smooth by years of use. Seating arrangements tend to repeat themselves. Individuals move toward familiar places without discussion. They form small clusters that remain stable from day to day. As workers sit, posture shifts from the upright alignment required by machine work to a more supported position. Backs rest against walls or against bench backs. Shoulders lower from their working height. Arms settle on thighs or on the edges of tables. The release of standing posture happens slowly. There are no sudden movements. Legs extend slightly forward or remain bent at right angles. Feet rest flat on the floor. These positions distribute weight more evenly across the body. They allow muscles to ease without losing their readiness. Containers with food are taken from bags or from lockers and opened in a consistent manner. The contents are practical and modest. They are chosen for ease of transport and for ease of consumption. Wrapping materials are folded and placed neatly aside. Eating proceeds at an even pace. It is neither rushed nor prolonged. Hands move between container and mouth with the same measured rhythm seen in work tasks, though now without the mechanical accompaniment of machines. Conversation during these periods remains quiet and localized in nature. Voices are lower than the background noise of the factory floor, but they are more easily heard here due to the reduced mechanical sound. Topics stay close to daily routines. They concern the pace of work, the condition of tools, the weather outside, or arrangements related to home responsibilities expressed in general terms. Exchanges are brief in duration. They often consist of short statements followed by nods or by simple replies. Facial expressions relax slightly compared to the concentrated focus required at the workstation. Eyes move more freely within the room. They acknowledge those seated nearby. Occasional faint smiles appear, but they are brief and restrained in nature. The overall tone remains calm. It is shaped by the understanding that the pause is temporary and structured. Hands that have been engaged in repeated motion now rest still or perform small restorative actions. Fingers flex and extend slowly, restoring circulation to the extremities. Palms rub together lightly to remove residual dust or to warm the skin. Some workers adjust sleeves or collars. They respond to the steady interior temperature that continues even in rest areas. The air in the break space carries traces of food and of clothing warmed by work. Ventilation is present but limited in its effect. It maintains a similar atmosphere to the main hall, though without the same density of industrial scent. Light remains steady throughout. It is provided by ceiling fixtures identical to those on the production floor. Shadows are soft. The visual environment does not change sharply from work to rest. Time during the break is tracked through habit and through the wall clocks positioned above doorways. Glances upward occur periodically. They often follow a natural pause in conversation or the completion of a portion of food. The movement of the clock hands marks the approaching return to stations. No audible signal is required. Shared awareness of the schedule ensures a coordinated transition back to work. As the break nears its end, containers are closed and stored away. Wrappings are collected and placed in designated bins. Bodies shift forward on benches. Feet draw back under knees in preparation to stand. These preparatory motions mirror the earlier adjustments made at the start of the shift. They form a repeated pattern that frames periods of activity and periods of rest. Rising from seats occurs in a steady sequence rather than all at once. Individuals stand, adjust their clothing, and move toward the exit of the break area in small groups. Conversation diminishes as attention turns toward the return to the machines. Footsteps along the corridors regain the measured cadence associated with movement during work. Re-entering the main hall brings the full layer of mechanical sound back into prominence. The auditory transition is gradual in nature. Volume increases step by step as workers move closer to the production floor. They follow familiar routes to their stations. They are guided by the same visual markers and structural features as before. The brief social focus that characterized the break narrows again to the specific zone of the workstation. At each station, the process of resuming activity mirrors the earlier preparation. Tools are checked for their position and condition. Materials are aligned properly. controls are returned to their operating positions. The first cycle after the break begins with the same smooth motion as those that came before. The body readjusts to standing posture. Muscles engage once more in the established pattern. The break period, though distinct in its character, does not disrupt the overall continuity of the day. It serves as a controlled interval within the broader rhythm. It allows physical recovery and permits limited social exchange while maintaining the structured character of the environment. The transition back to work is seamless. It is marked by the re-establishment of mechanical rhythm, by the return to steady posture, and by the renewal of focused attention. Production targets exist as a constant reference throughout the working day. They are present through visual markers and through established expectations, rather than through frequent verbal reminders. Boards positioned along the walls display numbers that correspond to output over periods that have been defined. These figures are updated at intervals. Their changes are noted during brief glances as workers pass by or during moments when materials are being replenished. The boards do not dominate attention in any overt way, yet their steady presence forms part of the background structure that shapes the pacing of work. The rhythm of each machine is set according to the technical requirements of the process it performs. But within that rhythm, small adjustments occur. When materials move smoothly and no interruptions arise, cycles follow one another with even spacing between them. If a minor delay occurs either upstream or downstream, the timing between actions may lengthen slightly. Workers sense these changes through sound and through motion. They respond by maintaining readiness rather than by altering their posture abruptly. Performance awareness is distributed rather than concentrated in any single location. Each worker understands the approximate flow expected from their station. This is measured in completed pieces or in processed units over time. This understanding develops through repetition. The hands learn how many cycles typically occur within a given span of time. Deviations register as a subtle difference in tempo. No single moment carries particular emphasis. Instead, the overall pace across hours provides the measure of output. Supervisors' circuits through the hall include periodic glances at output trays, at moving conveyors, or at storage points where finished items accumulate. These observations are brief in duration. A pause lasting only a few seconds allows comparison between the visible flow and the level that has been anticipated. When alignment is satisfactory, the supervisor continues walking without comment. When adjustment is needed, a short gesture or a quiet instruction addresses the immediate factor, such as material supply or machine setting. Visual tracking systems sometimes accompany the production boards. Simple charts or lists record cumulative totals. They are marked by hand at designated times. The act of marking is methodical. It is performed with the same economy of motion seen in machine operation. Workers nearby may notice the updated figures without altering their own movements. The information settles into awareness as part of the environment rather than as a separate event. The pressure associated with targets does not appear through raised voices or through visible urgency. Instead, it is expressed through the consistent maintenance of attention and posture. Workers remain oriented toward their tasks with few extended pauses. The regularity of motion reflects the understanding that continuity of effort supports the overall flow. This condition persists evenly across the shift. Material supply plays a role in sustaining output at the expected level. Carts arrive at intervals carrying new batches of parts. Their approach along the central aisles becomes a signal that the next sequence of cycles can proceed without interruption. Workers adjust the arrangement of stacks within their reach. They ensure that the transition from one batch to the next occurs smoothly. These preparations reduce gaps between cycles and help preserve the tempo that has been established. When a machine requires brief adjustment, the resulting pause is used efficiently. Hands clear debris, align guides, or check fastenings, while the mechanism is still. As soon as motion resumes, the regular rhythm returns. Such interruptions are treated as part of the process rather than as breaks from it. Their handling contributes to maintaining overall performance without visible strain. The awareness of consequences exists in a generalized form. It is tied to the importance of meeting expectations rather than to specific outcomes discussed aloud. This awareness influences careful handling of materials and adherence to procedures. Movements remain precise. They avoid actions that might cause damage or delay. The steady, attentive manner of work reflects this underlying understanding. Gauges and indicators on machines provide immediate feedback on operating conditions. Needles that remain within marked ranges signal that the process is proceeding correctly. Workers glance at these instruments in passing. They incorporate their readings into the continuous flow of observation. A change in position prompts a small adjustment. This restores alignment before a larger variation can develop. Group pacing also contributes to the sense of performance. When several adjacent stations operate at similar speeds, their combined motion creates a visual pattern that suggests balance. If one station slows noticeably, the difference becomes apparent in the staggered movement of arms or in the altered spacing of items on a conveyor. Such variations draw quiet attention from supervisors or from experienced workers. This leads to minor corrections. The environment supports this sustained focus. Lighting remains even, reducing visual strain. The temperature holds steady, preventing sudden discomfort that might distract from the task. The constant sound of machinery, though dense, provides a uniform backdrop. It masks smaller, irregular noises and keeps the auditory field consistent. Workers' internal pacing aligns with these external structures. Breathing remains steady. Muscle movements follow the established cycle. The body learns to distribute effort evenly, avoiding sharp bursts that would lead to early fatigue. This evenness supports the long duration of the shift. It contributes to meeting production levels without visible rush. Written rules and procedural notes displayed on walls reinforce expectations. Their presence is quiet but persistent. Workers pass them daily. Their content becomes familiar through repetition. The knowledge of these guidelines shapes behavior even when they are not actively being read. The tracking of output over time creates a sense of progression across the shift. Early hours establish the base level. Midday figures reflect the accumulation of many cycles. Later, the totals approach the expected range. These stages unfold gradually, without marked transitions. They form a continuous arc of activity. Throughout this process, the tone of the environment remains even. There are no dramatic changes in lighting, sound, or movement to signal shifts in pressure. Instead, the awareness of targets is woven into the same steady fabric as posture, machine rhythm, and social interaction. It shapes attention quietly. It reinforces the regularity that defines the working day. Beyond the immediate tasks of machines and materials, a broader atmosphere shapes how movement, speech, and posture settle into predictable forms. This atmosphere is not announced directly. It is present in the repetition of procedures, in the consistent alignment with schedules, and in the careful adherence to established patterns that extend from entry to departure. Workers carry themselves with a steady reserve. Their gestures are measured. Their attention is directed toward defined responsibilities. Clothing reflects this continuity. Garments are chosen for durability and for suitability to the environment. They change little from day to day. Sleeves are kept clear of moving parts. Collars sit flat. Fastenings remain secure. These details support safe operation, but they also contribute to a uniform appearance across the hall. Individual variation exists in small ways, yet the overall impression remains consistent. Speech within the factory follows similar lines. Voices stay low. They are shaped by noise levels and by habit. Remarks are functional and brief. they focus on materials, tools, or timing. Extended personal expression rarely enters the working space. Even during pauses, conversation remains within familiar limits. This restraint becomes part of the daily routine. It requires no explicit reminder. Movement between areas follows established routes. Workers do not cross the hall without purpose. Paths along aisles, around storage racks, and through corridors form a network that is learned through repetition. Deviation from these paths is rare. When necessary, it is carried out with attention to avoiding interference with ongoing processes. The predictability of movement reinforces the overall order. Rules governing conduct and procedure are visible on posted notices, but their influence extends beyond written form. They are embodied in the sequence of actions performed each day. This includes checking equipment before starting, placing tools in fixed locations, maintaining clear walkways, and handling materials in prescribed ways. These practices become automatic through repetition. They shape behavior without active deliberation. The presence of oversight contributes to this atmosphere in a quiet manner. Supervisors' circuits and the regular updating of production records remind workers that their tasks form part of a larger structure. This awareness encourages steadiness in pace and attention to detail. It does not manifest as overt tension. Instead, it creates a consistent background of alertness. This is similar to the constant hum of machinery. Caution appears in small, habitual gestures. Hands remain clear of moving parts except where required. Eyes check positions of guards and guides before each cycle. Feet avoid marked zones near heavy transport paths. These actions are integrated into the flow of work. They are repeated so often that they require little conscious thought. They reflect a shared understanding of maintaining continuity and avoiding disruption. Routine discipline extends beyond the machines themselves. Arrival times, break durations, and departure procedures follow a stable schedule. Workers adjust their internal sense of time to match these intervals. Glances at clocks occur at predictable moments. They align personal rhythm with the collective structure. The day unfolds as a sequence of known segments. Each is connected to the next without abrupt shifts. The psychological effect of this environment is one of steady containment. Attention narrows to the defined field of work. External concerns remain outside the boundaries of the hall. The physical enclosure of walls and the uniformity of light and sound reinforce this focus. Within these limits, behavior remains consistent. It is guided by established expectations. Even during rest periods, this atmosphere persists. Voices remain moderate. seating arrangements stay stable. The duration of pauses is respected. When the time comes to return to stations, the transition occurs smoothly. There is no delay or visible reluctance. The rhythm of the day resumes with the same order as before. This broader pattern shapes not only actions, but also the tempo of thought. Repetition of tasks and schedules reduces variation in daily experience. The mind moves along familiar tracks. It anticipates the next stage of the process. Surprises are rare. When they do occur, they are addressed through the same measured procedures. The environment outside the factory may change with weather or with season, but inside, conditions remain controlled and predictable. This contrast reinforces the sense of a distinct sphere governed by its own regularity. Workers adapt to this stability. They carry the habits of caution, restraint, and routine discipline throughout the shift. As hours pass, the atmosphere remains unchanged. Sound continues at its established level. Light holds steady. Movements repeat in known patterns. Within this framework, each action aligns with the next. They form a continuous chain shaped by shared expectations and by the constant presence of structured order. The final portion of the shift approaches without any sharp signal being given. It is marked instead by gradual changes in the flow of activity. Materials at individual stations diminish as the last sets for the day are processed. Workers continue their cycles with the same measured pace they have maintained throughout. Yet the stacks of unfinished pieces grow smaller. Trays of completed items fill to their intended levels. This slow shift in the balance of materials signals the nearing end more clearly than any sound could. Machines complete their final sequences in order. A piece enters, is shaped according to its design, and exits along its usual path. When the last required unit passes through, hands move to steady the output tray and to clear the working surface. Controls are returned to neutral positions through practiced motions. Switches are turned. Motors wind down from their steady hum to a softer tone before falling silent. The reduction in sound happens in stages across the hall as stations conclude at slightly different times. As each machine stops operating, the space it occupied acoustically becomes quieter. Still, the overall hall carries residual noise from areas that are finishing later. The layered sound thins gradually. It reveals the underlying echo of footsteps and the soft contact of tools being placed on benches. The vibration that traveled through the floor fades. This leaves the concrete more still beneath the feet. Cleaning and ordering actions follow immediately. Cloths pass over metal surfaces. They remove dust and residue that accumulated through hours of contact. Small fragments are brushed into containers. Tools return to hooks or to drawers in fixed positions. These motions are unhurried and precise. They ensure that the workstation is left in a condition ready for the next day. The pattern mirrors the preparation that began the shift. It closes the cycle. Workers' posture shifts slightly during these tasks. The close alignment with machine openings gives way to a more upright stance as surfaces are wiped and items are stored. Shoulders lower as the continuous lifting of materials ceases. Hands still warm from repeated motion move more slowly now. They perform broader gestures rather than the tight, repetitive ones of production. Around the hall, similar scenes unfold in parallel. Rows of machines stand quiet. Their metal forms reflect the steady overhead light. The visual rhythm of moving parts is replaced by stillness. Only a few areas remain active, where later processes finish their final runs. Supervisors pass through once more. They observe the closing procedures and note the state of equipment and materials. Waste containers are sealed or moved aside. Remaining raw materials are stacked neatly for the next shift. Their edges are aligned. Finished goods are arranged for transport. Their positions are marked clearly. These arrangements create an ordered landscape across the floor. It is defined by straight lines and by clear spaces. The air, though still warm, feels different as machines cease adding heat and motion to the environment. Without the constant vibration, the body registers the firmness of the floor more distinctly. Footsteps become the primary sound. They echo lightly between walls and beams. Conversations, if they occur, remain brief and low. They are shaped by the same habits as during work. When personal items are retrieved from storage areas, movements remain steady. Coats are lifted from hooks. Sleeves are found. Buttons or fastenings are secured. The sensation of heavier outer clothing contrasts with the stable interior temperature, yet this change is gradual. Workers adjust collars and cuffs with familiar motions. The path toward the exit follows the same routes used at the start of the day. Corridors carry a quieter atmosphere now. The mechanical sound is reduced to a distant layer. Light remains constant. It guides the way without emphasis. Groups move in a loose sequence. They are neither hurried nor slow. Their steps are aligned with the closing rhythm of the shift. At the threshold of the main doors, the exterior air becomes perceptible before it is fully felt. The scent and temperature differ from the interior's steady environment. As the doors open, this outside air mixes briefly with the factory atmosphere. Then it replaces it as workers step through. The change is smooth. There is no abrupt contrast. Outside, The sky and open space widen the field of vision after hours spent within the structured interior. Sounds from the industrial hall diminish behind the walls. They are replaced by the broader, softer tones of the surrounding area. The body continues to move at the same measured pace for a short distance. It carries the rhythm of work outward. Shoulders settle into a more relaxed position as the need for constant alignment with machines ends. Hands, no longer occupied with materials, rest at the sides or adjust clothing. The steady hum that filled the ears fades. It leaves a quieter auditory field. Breathing remains even. It gradually attunes to the outdoor air. The departure does not carry a sense of conclusion. It unfolds as a continuation of the day's sequence. It transitions from one environment to another through the same principles of order and routine. The factory building stands behind, unchanged in form. It is ready to receive the next cycle. The motion of workers disperses along familiar routes. Their steps remain steady as the structured rhythm of the shift recedes into a softer, more distant presence.